Welcome to Rogue Trader. Please read the disclaimer and remember that prices can go down as well as up. Hello and welcome to the Greta Gold stock selection series. So this stock series takes a look at renewable energy and companies that you can invest in to take part of the green revolution. But first, here's a word from the President of the United States.
Nothing gives me more hope for the future than seeing my 5 grandchildren challenge expectations. They see breakthroughs in technology we can't even yet imagine. But in ice sheets, it's already happening. And science tells us that how we act or fail to act in the next 12 years will determine the very livability of our planet. Yet today, President Trump denies the evidence in front of his own eyes, hides climate science produced by his own administration, and actively works to roll back what progress we've already made. It's reckless, it's irresponsible, and it is unacceptable. So today, I'm announcing my plan for a clean energy revolution. It outlines what we have to do to meet this challenge head on and how we're going to get there. We're going to invest $1.7 trillion in securing our future so that by 2050, the United States will be 100% clean energy economy with net zero emissions.
So one thing for sure is that all of the Western governments are completely behind environmentalism. And whether you're a climate change skeptic or a supporter of environmentalism, the fact is that the governments of all the Western countries are totally behind environmentalism and totally behind becoming carbon neutral. Boris Johnson just vouched a package to subsidise creating UK carbon neutrality by 2050, and it's expected that the UK government will be spending $1 trillion before 2050. The UK is also planning to ban all new internal combustion engine cars by 2030. The European Union, back in January 2020, announced this Green New Deal, and they're going to be spending $1 trillion to subsidise carbon neutrality by 2050. By the way, this Green New Deal meant that the EU is going to be spending a quarter of its budget every year on climate change. I found that quite interesting because presumably their budget is going to be quite stretched now that the UK's left the European Union. But so this really does show how seriously the European Union believes in environmentalism. And as you saw in the video, the Joe Biden official policy is to invest 1.7 trillion over 10 years to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Also, it's quite notable that Joe Biden rejoined the Paris Climate Accord as soon as he was voted into office. So it's quite clear that all of the governments of the Western world are totally committed to this green train. And so I do think it's certainly a worthwhile sector to investigate. So we know that there's 4 trillion going into net zero carbon projects. The question is, though, what are the main areas within that to be targeting? I have some data here from the Institute of Government Analysis that show UK emissions by sector. And you can see how emissions have been going down quite a lot ever since 1990. Now, a lot of these at the bottom are required emissions, so residential, agriculture and industrial processes, which are notably much lower than they were back in 1990. But you see that actually the 2 biggest contributors are transport and energy supply. So this then does show why the governments are targeting transport and energy. And they're targeting transport by banning internal combustion engine cars and forcing everyone to drive electric vehicles. And they can target the energy supply by moving over to renewable energy. Primarily in the UK, that's going to be wind farms and biogas. Now, what I've established from my research is that then we have the main investment areas of renewable energy, particularly biogas and wind power, and energy storage and transmission. And that's because the problem with the renewables is they tend to, so the wind farms, for example, they can only produce electricity when the wind blows. but obviously the electricity is needed around the clock, month in, month out. So that creates a problem of how to store that energy and transmit it across the network. Another thing coming from the rise of the electric vehicles is this is going to require vast amounts of nickel, aluminium, iron, copper, graphite, lithium. And so a big central plank of renewable energy is going to be all the mining companies that are going to be digging out of the earth all of these minerals and rare earths that are going to be used in electric vehicles and also in making windmills and things like this. So I've gotten here onto the International Energy Agency's website, and here for each country you see a breakdown of how the electricity is being generated, and you can see that the UK has reduced its coal and now it's mostly natural gas for fossil fuels. Nuclear is making a big contribution to zero carbon emissions, but you see that most of the renewable is in the form of wind and biofuels. Biofuels actually includes importing wood from Canada and then burning it as special granules, which are counted as recyclable because they come from sustainable forests. But it also includes conversion of waste and stuff into hydrogen gas and also some kind of biogas. Wind is obviously a lot more straightforward, where you build massive windmills and then convert the energy from the wind. You can see here how, with regards to the overall emissions plan, the government's planning to attack the emissions from energy supply by focusing mainly on increasing wind and biofuels. Now, what's interesting is if you go to total energy supply by source, then you see that actually a lot of this is oil and natural gas, and a lot of that natural gas is obviously to heat people's homes, but the oil is obviously a large contributor of our overall emissions, being the emissions from transport. So there you can see how by banning the internal combustion engine, the UK government's going to be able to reduce this oil consumption. One thing I worry about is that when they do this, because electric cars will probably be more expensive, poor people will no longer be able to afford to drive a car. That kind of concerns me as a possible side effect of this drive by the government to follow these policies, although I'm sure that saving the environment is more important, a priority as far as they're concerned. Out of interest, if you go and look at China's data, you can see that while the Western countries are basically converting into more expensive renewable energy, the developing countries like China are burning coal like it's going out of fashion. You know, it's quite concerning this, that while the Western countries are going the responsible route, China and India and African countries are just creating all this extra pollution, which is kind of undoing the efforts of the Western nations. And it's just quite interesting to me that there's no publicity of this, despite these massive shifts and expense going on in the West. So, for example, the EU spending a quarter of its budget on becoming carbon neutral. There's a very interesting disparity here, but I don't want to read into it more than that. So I've identified the main areas of investment as renewable energy, particularly biogas and wind power, energy storage and transmission, and the mining companies that are going to be digging out of the earth all these vast quantities of nickel and other metals to support this green revolution. So I've used some stock filters to then get my initial shortlist. I use various stock filters, including the London South East website, Reuters stock filter, and also the London Stock Exchange stock filter. So here you can see I've selected alternative energy, and you click on apply filters, and it churns out all of the stocks within that filter. So using that technique, I've got a list of stocks that counters UK renewable energy plays, a list of stocks which are engineering and electricity transmission plays, and I'm going to also do commodity stocks, but that's going to be as a separate video series that will be on just commodities. So I went through all these companies and had a quick look at them all, and deleted ones that when I investigated them and read their annual report, they weren't quite targeting my Greta Gold plays as much as I thought. And I also deleted ones that when I looked at their assets and when I looked at their income statements and their basic finances, I thought they looked like total shit shows. So for a mixture of those reasons, I very quickly were able to delete some of these companies. And so that left me with these companies that I've not crossed out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend about 4 hours on each company and do a series of stock analysis blitz videos where I just give a quick account of each of them. So I should then come to a final shortlist, and I'll spend a lot more time investigating those stocks as I complete my journey in finding some Greta Gold environmentally friendly investment ideas.